Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Rob Simonds, and I'm the president of the board of the Downtown Chamber Series. And I'm here with Leslie Frey Anderegg, fantastic violinist, first violinist in the Phoenix Symphony, a fearless DCS performer who will tackle the hardest repertoire in all the music that we play. And this weekend is no different. She's performing Black Angels and Jessie Montgomery's Rhapsody No.1, October 9th, 10th, and 11th at the All One House. Jessie Montgomery is an American composer whose star has been on the rise for some time. She was born in the early 80s in New York City, and I first played her music 4 or 5 years ago, but in the past 5 or 6 years, her repertoire has become a staple of orchestras across the country. And stylistically, she combines all sorts of American vernacular music, West African music, but this piece that Leslie's going to perform is, even though it has an improvisational flair, improvisational quality, is quite specifically written out and quite technically challenging. So Leslie, can you tell us a little bit about what drew you to the piece, first of all, and maybe some of the challenges of learning it?
Yeah, so I perform in Downtown Chamber Series about probably an average of every year, but the past couple I haven't done a solo. So when Mark brought that up, I was just sort of looking around for, is there any new interesting solo violin pieces I'm not aware of? And I had a few things in mind, and I've played some of Jessie Montgomery's orchestral or her string orchestra pieces, Banner and Starburst, and I guess I hadn't listened to the whole album. So I came across the fact that she was working on and has two of these rhapsodies, is planning to make 6 solo violin works eventually. And I pretty much listened to this first one, and I knew immediately that Mark would love having it on the series. And so I said, Mark, I think I should play this, and bought the sheet music because it was just immediately so accessible on a first listen, but also had the virtuosity that is fun to have in a violin solo.
Mm-hmm. And when you think about the virtuosic elements of the piece, what audiences maybe, what might their ear be drawn to that they'd heard before? What are some of its influences?
Yeah, I think she dedicated this one to Izai, who I've played one of his solo sonatas on this series before, and you can definitely hear that, or it sort of has the classic shape of a violin caprice of starting out slower and then you work your way into this frenzy, and then in this case it ends sort of more contemplatively too. But I think in this one specifically, you really can hear in one section in the middle, it gets into a part where it's a technique called bariolage, which just means like using a lot of different strings, and she uses harmonics to sort of create, often it would be with open strings, and that really reminds me a lot of Vivaldi or other Baroque composers like that. And then in the arpeggiated chord section right after that, it definitely reminds you of Bach chaconne a little bit. And so I think the whole piece is really written very nicely for the violin, in a way that, which I was a little nervous about, because when you listen to something and you haven't seen the sheet music yet, you're never quite sure what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah, well, it should be noted that Jessie is a really fine violinist in her own right. Um, Leslie, could you expand a little bit on this idea of this lineage of solo violin pieces? So you mentioned Bach, you mentioned Vivaldi's Baroque composers, and he's like, so what are some of the differences technically? You go from Bach, and then you go to this, then you go a couple of hundred years into the future with Izai. So talk to me about that gap, like as a violinist, and then maybe what she adds on top of that.
Right. So Bach, of course, wrote these 6 solo sonatas and partitas that are sort of the standard of that type of work that other composers have been looking at for centuries. Hundreds of years later, Eugenie Tsai wrote this set of 6 that are very popular. I played number 4 in the series, and some of them have even snippets of Bach in it, but he took the instrument and techniques that violinists were doing were so different by then. We're playing higher notes, louder notes, more notes simultaneously.
And
Sort of,
sound effects too.
yeah. That I don't think Bach wouldn't have didn't use pizzicato in any of his. Isai has parts with effects like that, and so then I think now it's exciting to have someone like Jessie Montgomery, who also aspires to write 6 solo works. You know,
Mhm.
in this tradition, but then her style incorporates, well, in this one, like a lot of harmonics, and sometimes a harmonic held at the same time as another note, which is a difficult technique. And hers also uses ponticello, where you play with the bow very close to the bridge and get sort of a certain effect. And if you like the sound of that, you're gonna love Black Angels. Also used a lot of that piece, but yeah. So it's just, and I think if you like her Rhapsody No.2 is very different in style than this one. So who knows where she'll go with all the different influences on these.
That's a great point, Leslie. So you mentioned Black Angels and some of the similarities there, these new and creative ways of using the instrument. For Black Angels, you're performing that amplified. Are you going to perform Rhapsody amplified?
Yes, I'm not. We're definitely going to use a little amplification just because last year we were at, because the venue is outside for these concerts, which is really nice and has beautiful lighting and everything, but the stage we thought needed a little boost. So I think it will be hopefully.
Cool. So talk to me about the contrast of performing these two works in the same program. So one piece, Black Angels from the 1970s, that is unconventionally very challenging. It is a lot of extended techniques, using the instrument in very different ways, playing on wine glasses, the kitchen sink of different ideas. And then contrasting that with performing a piece that is conventionally quite difficult. How do you prepare for a program like this?
I would say very carefully. I usually would split up my practice because it is such different pieces that think of, well, here's a chunk that I'm going to work on the Montgomery. And that's, even though it's a great new piece, the techniques are much more familiar than what's going on in Black Angels, to me at least. And I think
Mm-hmm.
most professional musicians don't play a lot on wine glasses. And so then I would practice the Montgomery, which I'm also performing off the iPad for the first time on a downtown chamber series. So we're really coming into the 21st century here. And then I would get out all my toys and things and transition to working on Black Angels, which, just required. I mean, there is one technique in Black Angels that I was not able to learn. It's the part where I'm supposed to whistle at the same time as playing. And I said to the group, I was like, I'm 40 years old. Wait, I'm 41 years old. I've never been able to whistle. I'm not sure that I can learn this in 1 month. So Aaron graciously took on the whistling part, but the rest of it, starts out and you look at the page and it's completely overwhelming. It's my first time performing it. So I just tried to break it down, and even listening to recordings and like, what is happening here, and start to
Mm-hmm.
figure out all these little glass rod hitting techniques and like the playing backwards. Yeah, so.
Yeah, there's a lot of detail in there and it keeps revealing itself with each performance. Leslie, you talked a little bit about how you perform in the chamber series maybe once a year over many years. Can you tell us a little bit about how you see the chamber series fitting into the tapestry of Phoenix music scene, and perhaps what does it mean to you as a performing artist that makes her home in Phoenix?
I mean, I feel like Dutton Chamber Series has really like been a huge part and one of the best parts of my career here in Phoenix. Just because back to like so many memorable concerts over the years, the time I decided to run a marathon in the morning and then play a Bartok string quartet in the evening of the same day. That was a big one. And yeah, I really feel like for me, it's been such a great experience to have an outlet where I could suggest or perform a solo that's been on my mind, and in a cool space. And the concerts are always set up so nicely by Mark, and just a place to do that, even though the bulk of my focus and career it has been on orchestral music, so I'm not setting up solo recitals very often on my own, and so this is a great place to play chamber music with friends and colleagues and some solo works. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Leslie. I appreciate you taking the time to walk us through preparing for such a heavy lift of a program that you guys have coming up this weekend. Anything else you want to talk about that might be coming up?
Oh, actually, there's a neat connection that we found out after I was already planning to play this piece on the concerts is that a local nonprofit, Rosie's House, um, that works to eliminate barriers to high quality music education. I think the Becky Bell might be on the board of the Chamber Series.
She is, in fact, Becky is a
They
valuable member of our board.
we found out that they are opening a new building downtown around 9th Street and Jefferson. And the grand opening, I think it's the beginning of November, but at the end of the month, I'm going to play this piece again because on one whole wall of the building, they've commissioned a mural from a local Phoenix artist. And her inspiration for the mural is actually Jessie Montgomery's Rhapsody No.1. And she's incorporated it into this mural. And so I'm going to play there at the end of the month.
That's what makes this thing special, and Phoenix's music scene special is these small linkages between nonprofits and arts organizations in the city that makes it such a unique place to experience and consume and produce music. So Leslie, thank you for all your hard work putting this program together. I'm sure people will really appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me, and take care.
Thanks. Looking forward to it.